this weekend is we're celebrating the 325th anniversary of the establishment of St. Margaret's Church. And last evening, as we were concluding, as Peter was concluding, he lit 13 candles, reminding us that we have roughly 13 generations, 13 periods of 25 years since this church was established in 1692. But what does it mean that we were established in 1692? For that, we have to jump back 2 more generations to 1634, when we become an English colony. Drop back to about 1649, when Charles I names Maryland after his wife. His wife was Henrietta Marie. We could have easily been Henrietta Land. And the next year, Anne Arundel County takes its name from the wife of Charles Calvert, that we had been Providence. So you find so much even throughout this county that is called Providence, because we were Providence and then we became Anne Arundel County. By 1688, there was a glorious revolution that occurred in England, and it followed in Maryland in 1689. And the glorious revolution was this: that the Protestant religion, that is the Anglican Church, and the crown had been restored to the Protestant Church. And by 1689, the vestiges of the Puritans had pretty much disappeared, and this colony would be roughly 1/12 Roman Catholic, 1/12 Quaker, and about the rest, and particularly our part of the world right here, was emerging from being Puritan. Yes, our heritage is Puritan. So the Act of 1692, the Act of 1692 was called an Act for the Establishment of the Protestant Religion. That's what we're celebrating, the Act for the Establishment of the Protestant Religion. And what it did is it laid out 30 parishes, 4 in Anne Arundel County, including Broadneck Parish, which has become today our St. Margaret's Church. You have at your seats work that Ernie Tucker did with the History and Archives Project, detailing our focus on 4 rectors, 3 of whom occurred during the period of the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and most of the 1900s. When Bishop Glasspool speaks, she gets to talk about one of those candles that Peter lit last night. In the next couple minutes, try to deal with the other 12. Even though this parish was established on June 9th of 1692, if you had woke up the next morning, you would have noticed nothing different. You were emerging from being a Puritan to becoming an Anglican. You were reaffirmed that the Act had made second-class citizens out of Roman Catholics and out of the rich Quakers. Yeah, this county had the only rich tobacco-growing, slave-holding Quakers in all of the new colonies. But you had been assured that as you were becoming Anglican, you were on the right path. And of course, it required that you be a part of a Trinitarian religion in order to own property. So if you were Jewish, you didn't belong. But that had been pretty much in effect since 1648. But 1692, not much happens. Well, we don't have church, we don't have a rector. Perhaps we had a man by the name of Philip Jones reading to us sermons that were sent to us by the Bishop of London 2 years prior, before they found their way over here. But by 1698, we have a church. We have a church in Cape St. Clair. It's our first church. We have a rector, Mr. Edward Topp, Jr. Mr. Topp's with us just a little over a year. He goes to St. Anne as rector, and he's dead at age 28. An Oxford graduate, he is dead at age 28. The second period we want to focus on is at the end of the Revolutionary War, the end of the 1700s. Mr. Duke is our rector. He becomes the first rector to be born in the United States. He becomes the first rector to be ordained by a bishop, by an American bishop. He's with us for a short time. He crosses a period of the centuries. He's rector at our second church. You all know where 84 Lumber is? That's good enough. It's now 50 feet below the ground. We've got 2 acres there. We're there from 1731 until 1803 when it burns down. And then we've only got Marley Chapel of Ease. So Mr. Duke is our rector. He leaves. He too becomes rector of St. Anne's at a later time in 1804. A third period we'd like to look at is Dr. Samuel Rideout. He's our rector from 1846 until 1860, and then again from 1870 until 1885, when he dies after paddling his canoe across Whitehall Creek. Dr. Rideout is probably our most interesting rector. It's his wife who gives us the 8 acres that takes us from a 1-acre church landed here in 1827 to a 9-acre church at the time of Dr. Sam's death because of the gift of his wife, of Hester Chase Rideout. Dr. Sam was with us for 14 years. He leaves to become rector of a church in Scottsville, Virginia, 14 miles south of Charlottesville. He serves as a surgeon as well, because he was a medical doctor and a priest. He serves the South as a surgeon for the Confederate Army, as well as serving the souls at the church in Scottsville. Dr. Sam is also the one who early on, before the fire that burns the church here in 1851, opens this church for colored services on Sunday afternoon, until the church burns in 1851. To the time that he becomes rector in 1846 until 1851, there are colored services every other Sunday here at 2:30 in the afternoon during good weather. And we read Dr. Sam's report to Bishop Whittington that says services will continue because the colored are well behaved. Dr. Sam serves until 1860, leaves for the Confederacy and returns in 1870. And we find an incredible ministry on the part of Dr. Sam, not only to the people of his parish, but also to those persons of African descent who are freed slaves, although there are never any services for persons of color within this church. Now, one of the things that I've heard is, Mike, that sign that's up there that says Servants Entrance at St. Margaret's, that meant that that's where colored entered. Actually, that's over a door that was not built till 1986. So don't worry about that sign. One of the things we would remind you of this parish during its first several hundred years of existence is that we existed more years, 172 years, we existed under slavery. When chattel slavery ended in Maryland on November 1 of 1864, Dr. Sam himself gave up the 3 enslaved persons who worked at Whitehall, which was the rectory and his residence. We're a parish that's seen 43 rectors, 3 locations, plus Marley Chapel of Ease. We've seen about 5 churches. We see a celebration tonight of our establishment. Understand, the establishment means that this was legislation that was passed by the Colonial Assembly, signed by the governor of June 9th, 1692, and not much happened after that. It also meant that there were other groups that were disenfranchised as a result of our establishment. What we know what we can do today, as Mary will share with us and Peter will share with us, we can look at the immediate, but our past is built on disparate factors. It is built on slavery. Thank you for being with us.
As I understood the assignment, and I don't often understand it accurately. Mike Winn was supposed to cover the first 300 years. And in 7 minutes or less. Yeah, I don't think it is. All right. It's like if I can't, can you hear me?
Yeah. Don't worry about the mic.
Do I need to use this?
No. Don't worry about it.
Good, I don't want to worry about it. So I get the period from 1990, I get the 25-year transition, and then Peter gets to talk about the future. Where's Peter? I want to hear 300 years into the future. Like, I get the transition, and you want 300 years into the future from that guy. So I actually spent some time thinking about the 25-year period.
It's needed. Ah, there it goes. That's why I have hearing aids, because I can hear whether the mic's on or not. So just to set the parameters here, in the period of time from 1991 or 1992 to 2017, the year we're in now, we've had Presidents George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump. In 1991, the World Wide Web publicly debuted as an internet service in 1991. In 1991, the USSR split up, thereby ending the Cold War. In 1999, and I know Jim Hall will remember this, we were worried about Y2K, right? Everybody had gotten on the computers, and we thought, there's going to be Y2K. We go from 1999 to 2000, and the computers are going to. I was worried. And in that 25-year, you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
And in that 25-year period, and particularly recently, we've had hurricanes, earthquakes, firestorms, mudslides, tornadoes, lots of natural disasters. While I was here, the Oklahoma City bombing occurred, the Columbine High School shooting. But then in more recent history, and within that 25-year period, we've had the Aurora, Colorado movie theater killing, the Newtown, Connecticut shooting, San Bernardino in California, Orlando, Florida, Las Vegas, Nevada, and countless others that I haven't named. So it's been a pretty rough time. I read a book recently by Thomas Friedman called Thank You for Being Late. And his thesis is that to understand the 21st century, you need to understand that the planet's three largest forces, technology, globalization, and Mother Nature, climate change and biodiversity, are accelerating all at once. So we're used to, things going like this, maybe on a growth pattern, and all of a sudden these three major areas of our life are going like this, all at once. And those accelerations coming together for kind of a perfect storm for our world affect and transform 5 key areas: the workplace, politics, geopolitics, ethics, and community. So there's the setting of 25 years. So I can't do the whole 25 years, but I want to cite 3 things about St. Margaret's. In that 25-year period, I think St. Margaret's not only became, but has blossomed as a loving, Christian, growing community that is inclusive of everybody and that is responsive to not only the immediate community, but the world. St. Margaret's is a very, very special place, and as I reflected on my time here, I've told a couple of people, it really, the longer I lived my life, the more that was sort of the heart of my life's experience, was being here and engaging with all of you. I told VJ, and I really mean it, you really taught me how to talk about Jesus, how to share my faith, how to engage, and how to move through difficult times. And God knows we have lots of challenges in today's world. So hold on to St. Margaret's is a loving, growing Christian community that is all-inclusive, where everyone's welcome, that is responsive to the needs of the community, and, not to be overlooked, is centered in the life, ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The second thing I thought about, and I've seen signs of it all around, is when the endowment came. Another thing, Jim Hall was senior warden for more than half the time I was here. So when the endowment came, of course, Charlie Grayston will know this too, because I think Charlie was the one that announced it to Jim and me before a vestry meeting, and Jim had to kind of pick me up off the floor. But so here's what I want to say about that, though. This church went for 300 years without an endowment, you know? And a couple of the things that happened once we received this bequest from Ed and Zoe Hall from their estate was all of a sudden, you know, I really actually, Jim can attest to this, I was worried. It was like, I'd been here 2.5 to 3 years. We finally got all the financial records out there. The vestry finally understood the budget. We were posting the vestry minutes. We were trying to be transparent and fiscally accountable and all like that. And things were working well. And I thought, this is great. We're healthy. Boom, $2 million. And I thought, there goes the stewardship campaign. And we tried to be low-key about it, but you know, we announced the gift, and of course, Monday morning came into church and, you know, had 15 calls from people who wanted to be on the endowment committee. We didn't have an endowment committee. And I've been beating the bushes for people to run on the vestry. I mean, it was that kind of thing. So probably one of the smartest things we did was we took a 2-year moratorium on spending either principal or interest until such time as we could pray about it. And we could understand that this was not our money, but a gift entrusted to us by the Halls and by God. And since it wasn't our money, we were simply charged with being good stewards of it. And that was a burden as well as a responsibility. I mean, it's hard to make those decisions. And I think that has stood the parish community in good stead for the last 25 years. So I want to tell you a little story that points to the fact that economic realities are usually relationally based. Now, this story comes from a very dear friend of mine in Los Angeles, actually, Serena Beeks, who's the commissioner of schools there. In the upper reaches of Saskatchewan, there is a small town hard hit by tough economic times. One night, a stranger comes into the small hotel. "May I look at your rooms?" he asks the hotel owner. "Here's a deposit to show I am serious." He puts a $100 bill on the counter. The owner says, "Yes, of course," and hands him several keys. The minute the stranger is up the stairs and out of sight, the owner snatches up the $100 and takes it to the butcher shop, where he pays the long overdue meat bill for the hotel's restaurant. The butcher takes the $100 out to the farmer, who has been providing him beef on credit. The farmer takes the $100 bill and gives it to the town prostitute, who has been extending credit to him, as otherwise there would be no business at all. The town prostitute takes the $100 bill and pays for her hotel room. The stranger comes back downstairs. The $100 bill is lying on the counter. He picks it up and says, "Thanks, but I think I won't stay here after all. I want to cover a few more miles tonight." No actual money has been added to the economy, but everybody feels better. Understand? It's like, okay, so economics is relational. And I think if you're a loving community centered in the life, ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and you have a gift entrusted to you of the magnitude of that particular entrustment, you will deal well with it. The third thing is, you know, I came in on the 300th anniversary, and as Mike pointed out earlier, I left 3 weeks after 9/11. And needless to say, I wept through the last 3 sermons I gave, because it was a hard time, and it had hit this area in particularly personal ways, with people in the parish who were working in the Pentagon, and I think relatives of some of the people here tonight. That was a world-changing event, and it opened us all up to the need to know one another across religious lines, across faith lines, not just across economic lines, or it broke us open in a way to want to honor the stranger as guest in our communities, and to try to overcome the fear that is at the root of so much of when we do this, and try to build walls and set boundaries. And I think our response to that as a Christian community is to say, you know what, if we concentrate on our roots, if we allow our rootedness in Christ Jesus and in the faith that is ours by gift, and God knows we work at it too, if we allow our rootedness to grow stronger, we won't have to worry about the boundaries, because we'll be firmly grounded in our faith. So, you all are a loving community. I'm honored to be here. I feel at home, and I thank you for your attention.
All right. Not too bad.
Let's give it up for the band one more time. And I was asked to talk about the next couple of years of St. Margaret's, the future. Mary's thrown the gauntlet down to say, talk about 300 years. That's a long way off. That's a long way off. But I'm so buoyed by the last 300 years that we've had. And the transition that Mary talked about, obviously all the history that Mike talked about that we're celebrating this week. We're going to a good place. We're going to a good place because we have a great God who has led the way, who we follow, who's brought us this far. So we have nothing to be afraid of. But it's not going to be without challenges, right? It's not going to be without challenges. There's a phrase out there called VUCA. Some of you have heard of it. A futurist that I read named Paul Johansson talks about VUCA as an acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, volatility, I don't know how many of you have ever said it on a investor meeting. But you know about this. And you know that the current state of affairs in the world, there's a general sense of anger. Certainly we live with that in the United States. And we're one of the most affluent countries in the world. How are we this angry? What are we this angry about? But there's a sense of volatility in all that. The sense that one thing can push us over the edge. And I don't know how that abates. I don't know where that goes, how that gets dampened at all. Uncertainty. Again, it's what we're all talking about. Does anyone know what's going to happen next? Complexity. One of the reasons we don't know what's going to happen next is because the things are so darn complex. There's so many sides and so many different takes on different issues that no one can really figure out the right way to go. And finally, ambiguity. A lot of things, are just gray. Even though we all have relatives and friends who see things as black and white and don't know why we spend all this time dilly-dallying over answers, there's still this sense in us, certainly part of St. Margaret's Church, that things aren't as black and white as they should be. Right? Things are a little ambiguous. And that's where the Episcopal Church can play a part in the future. One of our greatest strengths, says Bishop Andy Doyle, who's probably a friend of yours, Mary, Andy talks about this idea that the Episcopal Church's greatest gift is to hold different ideas in tension with one another. It's a tremendous gift that we have in the church, that we don't have to have all the answers, neither do we have to agree with the person sitting in the pew in front of us or the pew behind us. I mean, some of us don't even agree with members of our own family about stuff, right? And they're going up to the communion rail with us. There's a tremendous strength that the world needs, and I can't imagine it won't need in the future. So there is going to be a place for Episcopalians. Not only that, there's going to be a place for churches like St. Margaret's, growing, dynamic, resourceful churches like ours. And I don't know if this is the right place, but a lot of you know that Amy Richter, the rector of St. Anne's, and her husband Joe, who is the associate there, they just announced that they're leaving St. Anne's at the end of January. St. Anne's is a pretty big church, so I have an offer in the mail to them to merge with us. It's a sweet deal for them. They get a little bit of swag from the 325 anniversary swag. And they can come over here and join the Broadneck Parish, right? But the idea that the world is going to need this Episcopal Church, because St. Anne's is in the same boat that we are. It's a strong church. It's got a great history. But guess what? Religion is a dying brand. That might be true in 2017. It was probably true in 1999. Maybe less true in 1969 when I was born. But religion is not a growth product these days. I don't know if it ever will be again. I don't know if the church will ever have the same cultural relevance that it did in the 50s or in the 1800s. But you know what? That might be a good thing. That might be a good thing. Because sure as it's not going to matter to my kids if they marry a Baptist or a Buddhist, a lot of denominational walls are falling down around us. Now if your neighbors move in and they're Roman Catholic, you don't bat an eye. If they're Muslim, you don't bat an eye. You just kind of say, well, welcome. Here's some cornbread that we just made. And that's the way the world is working now, which is different from the way it worked before. As denominational walls come down, we're free to move around. And we're free to go to churches that meet our needs. Churches that minister to our families. Churches that minister to our spouses and partners. Not only that, but less and less people are going to be churched. Now you say, well, that's maybe not a good thing, because the people that come to St. Margaret's Church generally come from other churches. But here's the deal. We're going to get more people in here that have never heard the Jesus story. We're going to get more people who have never been bored out of their gourd in Sunday school. We're going to get more people who never knew what a controlling, domineering church was, that controlled their culture, that sought to seek out one lifestyle as the be-all, end-all. So the Episcopalian brand, if you will, has a lot to say about that. If we continue to be that warm, welcoming, inclusive, radically hospitable place that we're trying to become now, we're going to have a future. Right? And it might not be here on this campus. And what does it look like in the future if we realize, you know what, these buildings are great, but let's go out into Annapolis. Let's go into Eastport. Let's go into the Clay Street. Let's go to places in Annapolis that need ministry. And let's talk to them. Let's talk to the housing developments in Skidmore and the places around the peninsula where housing isn't a given. Even where people who live in six-figure houses have trouble paying the bills because they're in debt. Just last year, we started working with Allison Matthews on children on the Broad Neck Peninsula who go to school here, whose housing is transient at best. They sleep from couch to couch. You know, what will a church do in instances like that? That is going to make the future of the church. You know, our liturgy is wonderful. Our services are wonderful. Our grounds are wonderful. We've got a lovely churchyard. We've got a growing great day school. All that's wonderful. But people are going to care less about those things and more about what your work is out in the world. And I want you to go home with that, because each of you has a role to play. Each of you is a minister of God. Each of you is a part of the royal priesthood to go out into the world and make the future for God. Now the good news in this is that God has already been there. God's already led the way. Right? So the hard work's been done. It's up to you to go do the rest. And that is the future of the church. All right? Good. So I'm going to ask the band to play an encore. Can you guys play an encore?
We got
Yes?
more than one.
We got more than one. All right, good. All right. Thank you.
All right. Not too bad. Too excited.
to share.